So what we did was we went out, identified community-based organizations that were already dealing or knew of the small businesses that were majorly and disproportionately impacted by COVID, to allow us to really tailor the funds that we were able to raise and to actually get into the hands of those that truly needed it, because they may have been a little too small to tap into the PPP program, or they didn't have the correct paperwork in place to be able to justify that they had incurred an economic impact due to COVID, or they didn't have sort of some of the basic sort of nuances of business operational management and finance and whatnot. So that allowed us to be able to truly develop an effective program that got funding into the hands of entrepreneurs that truly needed it.
Welcome to episode 59 of People Are the Answer. I truly believe that people are the only answer to the world's many problems. I'm Jeffrey M. Zucker, a serial entrepreneur, here to learn how innovators are creating outsized, transformational social impact. Today's episode features Ibrahima Souare, a community and economic development leader who currently serves as the Executive Director of NYPACE, which is the New York Professional Advisors for Community Entrepreneurs. He has dedicated his career to helping countless small businesses and entrepreneurs, especially those that are usually underserved. He was named in the 40 Under 40 Rising Stars of New York in 2021. Ibrahima and I discuss his immigration at a young age from Guinea, Africa, and navigating his new home, his educational and career journey, how he helps small businesses, the incredible number of acronyms in the nonprofit and government worlds, and much more. Here is Ibrahima Souare on People Are the Answer. Ibrahima, thank you so much for joining me on People Are the Answer.
Thank you, Jeffrey, for having me on. It's my honor and pleasure to be here today.
I appreciate it, and looking forward to digging in and helping everybody learn more about you. It'd be great if you could start off by just telling the listeners who you are, where you're based, and what your current role is.
Yeah, my name is Ibrahima Souare. I'm the current executive director at New York Professional Advisors for Community Entrepreneurs, otherwise known as NYPACE. The organization itself is based in New York City. By myself, currently, say, a temporary transplant here across the Hudson River in Kearney, New Jersey.
Got it. Very nice. And thank you for sharing that. And, in general in life, what would you say motivates you?
Yeah, there are a lot of different things, Jeffrey. Family, faith, the fact that this life, there is so much that we have the opportunity to be able to explore and engage in. The fact that I myself is someone who is a Black person, that I'm someone who is an immigrant. I understand the opportunity that this country has to offer. So with that sort of being my North Star, I see things in a positive light. One of the books that I've read that has had a tremendous sort of impact on me has been The Alchemist, and it talks about one being able to seek their personal treasure, and part of that it's about figuring out that personal treasure really lies within you, and once you understand how do you sort of discover your reason of being. It sets your sort of perspective on how do you approach life in a different sort of perspective on that end. So for me, it's really the motivation is my family, is my faith, and it's the opportunity to be able to leave a legacy.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned being an immigrant. Where did you grow up, and what was it like there?
Yeah, I'm originally from Guinea, West Africa, which is a country in the coastal side of the continent of Africa. Is about roughly 8 to 10 million people, probably about the same population as New York City itself. But the country itself, of course, a developing nation. I mentioned Francophone. I arrived or immigrated to this country when I was at the age of 7. So while sort of immigrating here. Was very excited because all of the stories that we hear and heard about America and the opportunity and things you have access to. I didn't speak a lick of English. All I knew was just saying one, two, three with those accents specifically. When I came here, we arrived in the Bronx, in Castle Hill, and most of my upbringing, whether it be from elementary to middle school to high school, and even most of my higher education has also been in the Bronx in New York City. Of course, I've moved around in other boroughs, from Manhattan to Brooklyn to even Queens. Staten Island is the only borough that I have not lived, but certainly the Bronx really molded me and allowed me to really understand the different dynamic and perspectives of being an immigrant and the immigrant experience, but also understanding the different socioeconomic barriers and triggers that exist.
In what were some of those that you noticed? What was it like coming in as a young immigrant?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot. So I had to learn English. Typically there's English as a second language. For me, English was my fourth language. So prior to got me here, I already spoke two of our native dialects, which is Maninke and Susu. And then in addition to that, the national language for Guinea is French. So it did take a bit of of sort of a transition to not only be able to learn and pick up the language, but also sort of the culture and certain hidden, I guess you could say, nuances of the community and the people, and I guess you can even say the public school system. So it was a lot to adjust to. But certainly, I can say that I was able to, make it just because of my perseverance and focus on just being able to get myself acclimated with this new country and this new community, and again, just the opportunities that were available.
Well, you do a lot to help your community, and I'm curious, when did that sort of desire to help those around you start? Is there a specific experience from childhood you remember that sort of put you on the path of giving?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just probably with my family dynamic, as people who have always instilled in us the value of community, a value of looking to, give back. In my faith, even smiling is a form of giving back. So for me, probably started more so towards I would say maybe towards the ending of my high school, heading into college, in terms of getting involved in community service. In high school, I was able to participate at the former, I guess you can say, the mayor of New York City, Michael Bloomberg. They had the 1 million tree initiative. So we were able to go around and actually, had the opportunity to plant a tree and saw, the different, advantages that would be in terms of, the impact it would have on the environment and the climate, sort of a long-term wise. So that was sort of the impetus of just giving back and doing just good. Then in college, I continued to get involved with different things, whether it be being a student athlete, being involved in student government. In student government, we had, I had sort of the task as the student government board vice president to be able to have, the purse for all of the different clubs, student clubs and associations that were there. They would oftentimes put proposals on, different events that they want to put on, community service and whatnot. I was able to get the opportunity, this was years ago, to sort of say, yes, this is approved. Let's get some funding to go out, into the community and do X, Y, and Z, or bring something onto the campus. The real, impetus of it was also the fact that my undergraduate degree was in political science. I, at some point, wanted to become an attorney. This was in high school. But then once I got into college, declared political science, was getting exposed to all these different, activities and whatnot. I felt that entrepreneurship would give me the best opportunity to really make an impact. Now, the question that I had to answer was, should I be an entrepreneur myself, or should I position myself to be an advocate for those that are looking to explore that? Within the immigrant community, especially those that take that chance to come to a new country, to seek opportunity, to seek, the pleasures and access that's available in this country. You typically would have that aspiration to explore entrepreneurship. So I saw that across, the different communities, and neighborhoods in the Bronx, whether it's the bodegas, whether it was the African markets, whether it's been some of the, local taxi cab drivers, or folks that would literally, have the, salons and braiding places and whatnot. So all of those caused me to step back and say, well, here I am, getting this information about how government is important and the different policy implications, and how taxes are all implied to be able to have these different resources. But these community of immigrants, and even, again, underserved communities, weren't really fully accessing or tapping into that. So the question became, how can I play a role in that? And I figured that, the best way to be able to do that would be through joining a nonprofit organization, which I was able to get that opportunity shortly after graduating with a nonprofit organization in the Bronx, in the South Bronx.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you got an early taste of like legitimate community responsibility when you were in high school and controlling some of that decision making. So I definitely see how that could help build that foundation. You mentioned getting your political science degree, I believe it was at the State University of New York.
Correct. Yeah, Lehman College. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and how was that?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to take a step back, because in college, in high school, I was initially really looking to go away, to get that full perspective and experience, given the fact that, again, elementary, middle school, high school were all essentially in New York City, namely in the Bronx. I really sort of had this itch to go out. However, because of the fact that I discovered that I was undocumented, and I didn't necessarily have all of the paperwork to be able to tap in or access the scholarships that were, that I was interested in. It pretty much put me in a tough position, because I could not afford to go to these private institutions or colleges, and I couldn't afford to go away. Although I got accepted to some of these major schools, I think I was even I lucked out in not being able to access a scholarship through the Posse Foundation scholarship opportunity. It all played a role for that, to keep me from really being able to tap in. But, Lehman, or rather the CUNY system, City University of New York, really gave me that opportunity, right? Because not only is it affordable, it, in addition to that, had all of the programs and resources, and its proximity to be in this great city really allowed for me to tap into it. So at first I was frowning down upon City University of New York school system, right? Because I'm like, I want to go to Columbia. I want to go to, one of these, NYU, or one of these major, institutions or whatnot. But I think because of the fact that I was undocumented, couldn't quite access those resources, it gave me a better appreciation of what it means, to have other avenues that are there for people like me that aspired and had the ambition, but weren't quite, sort of in that position to take advantage of it. So going into the CUNY, system, it gave me the access. It gave me the full perspective and the breadth of diversity in terms of the students, diversity in terms of the professors. So some of the professors, that I took classes in had graduated from Harvard and other, Ivy Leagues. So that allowed for me to still be able to, develop that intellectual sort of capacity and critical thinking that I think has given me the access and opportunity across the different career paths that I've had so far.
Absolutely. And But it makes sense why you appreciated that system. And I saw you stayed in the CUNY system for your master's in public administration.
That is correct. So after graduating Lehman College, my first ever job was at a local community-based organization called South Bronx Overall Development Corporation, SOBRO. Continued on for a few years, just getting some experience under my belt, and then I was having this itch of graduate school or advanced degree. And I said, okay, let me look at some options. MBA was top of the line. I'm looking at in the MBA schools and whatnot. And again, it's like, things might be a bit tough in terms of going to some of these top B schools and whatnot. Not that I doubted myself, just was looking at my current circumstance and what's reasonable and what's actually could be possible. And then I went back and looked at the CUNY system. Like, okay, which of these schools has a pretty decent, program or school? Baruch came to the top of mind. And I've spent probably a year and a half considering the MBA program there. I think they call it the poor man's business school because they have a stellar program, but yet it's quite affordable, and those that go through it perform exceptionally well. So while I was assessing that, another opportunity came about where I came into my realization, which was Masters in Public Administration. And I was like, what is this all about? So I got a little bit more understanding. So again, there is that side of, public advocacy, public policy, understanding the nuances of government and community and how to and government agencies and how do all those things sort of fold in together. And reflecting on where I was in my current experience at that time and where I'm aspiring to go, it sort of began to fit in. And then something else was revealed, that there was a prestigious fellowship program that was housed at that time under Baruch College's Mark School of Public and International Affairs called the National Urban Fellows Program. So I began considering it, spoke to the executive, the president of the National Urban Fellows Program, Mr. Miguel Garcia II, and he gave me great perspective on the program and the impetus of how they started and how it identifies mid-career level professionals and puts them on the trajectory of leadership positions and roles for community advocacy. So I was able to get selected into the National Urban Fellows Program, which had an opportunity to both get an academic degree while also getting trained in terms of leadership development and training. And then accelerated sort of my career trajectory from there.
From there, you became a business development associate at the Division of Minority and Women's Business Development. Is that right? At Empire State?
Yeah. So it was actually right before, because I was at the Empire State Development before I began my advanced degree. But Empire State Development, it was a tremendous opportunity because Empire State Development is New York State's chief economic development agency. And within that division, the Division of Minority and Women's Business Enterprise, at the time that I joined, it was at a pivotal point where the former governor, Andrew Cuomo, and his administration, they essentially had sort of a mandate in saying that we must include women and minority-owned businesses into the state's procurement pipeline, and ensuring that at least 30% of state contracts and state major projects and critical infrastructure will be able to create a pipeline for these community or this population of entrepreneurs. And myself, in that capacity, I essentially was able to cover the entire state. So now, not just focusing on the city of New York alone, but looking at, because sometimes it used to be anything above North Bronx or Mount Vernon or Yonkers is considered upstate New York. But I really got to see what upstate New York looks like and how vast the state of New York is, from North Country to Southern Tier to Western New York. It really allowed for me to really be able to, play a role in that. So I went around advocating for the state's program to get more businesses aware that this program exists to create opportunities to level the playing field and reduce the barriers that these entrepreneurs that are women and minority owned were facing. And there were opportunities for them to get involved. So that role really allowed me to not only advocate, it allowed for me to be able to inform and educate, and then it allowed for me to be in a position where real opportunities were created in terms of jobs, in terms of contracting dollars, and then in terms of the number of businesses that became certified and led to more opportunities for them to, do great things across their community and for the regional state of New York. So
That's impressive. And I know I read in your bio that you drove significant increases in vendor certification, which you just referred to a bit, and you implemented a mentor protege program. Can you talk about how that worked and sort of helped give those people the help that they needed?
Yeah. So the state of New York, prior to me joining at that time, they had attempted a mentor protege program. And the basis of it really was, okay, there are these major corporations or companies, which they call prime contractors. And then you have these smaller minority-owned businesses that they oftentimes call, sort of the subcontractors. Now, how do we pair them up so that there can be a symbiotic relationship, right? And allows for the prime contractors not to perceive these New York State MWBEs as sort of your involving them just to appease or check off the box, but truly view them as a partner. So initially, it was started with that impetus, but in realization and trying to operate the program, it was not functioning accurately or appropriately. So one of the things that while I was there within the business development team, what we did was we began to do roundtable discussions, right? And first and foremost, we identified, which industries are we seeing a high concentration of circulation of, contracting opportunities or sort of fundings, and then where are we seeing the lack of involvement of MWBEs? So those included IT, those included architectural engineering, those included some of the professional services areas that would do management consulting and whatnot. So we went through, looked at the directory, so who is doing what, who has the capability, who has the willingness and the capacity to actually be a value add to these prime contractors. And then from there, we also went to speak to some of these prime contractors that were, performing in these spaces. Said, okay, what are your pain points? How can you view the state of New York as a support rather as from an adversarial standpoint? Here is a program that we can create that will be able to appease your needs, and then in addition to that, can be able to create this relationship that will be mutually beneficial. So then we established this refreshed New York State Mentor Protege program, and we focused on the professional services side. We identify a major, I think one of the 4 accounting firms. I don't want to give any specific names, but they were doing major work for both, different, specifically Department of Health. And then there was also another company that was doing some work with the state of New York, Empire State Development, our agency at that time. And we felt that, hey, you're doing some work in IT, management consulting. Here's an IT firm that we believe can really be able to support this project. And from there, we created this mentor protege program where not only are they involved, but the mentee would be supported in terms of infrastructure building, resource establishment, knowledge transfer to truly build their capacity to a point where, without the mentor, the mentee or the protege can still be able to be on that sustainability and growth trajectory. And I'm happy to report that, from that relationship and me taking over, that organization or those 2 companies were able to create a mutually beneficial relationship that has led to jobs being created and and dollars in terms of revenues being impacted on that front.
That's incredible. It must be rewarding to see those types of things come together, all of that hard work, turning into real progress that you can see.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, for me, the most gratifying thing is when I hear someone initially come to me and say, Ibrahima, I'm trying to do this with this business. I have this idea. We've had some traction, but I'm experiencing some growth issues, some growing pains. What do you know? How can you help me here? And then at the end of that they come back and they say, listen, you truly did help my business in a tangible way that others that we would go to just give fluff and say, here and go there. Here is some templates. But for you, you were very specific. And then you handheld us to the point where it actually translated into tangible opportunities that they, have been able to leverage and utilize.
So it sounds like 4 successful years at Empire State Development. What were your next steps before you made it to NYPACE?
Yeah, so from the state of New York, I then transitioned to a again City University of New York again at LaGuardia Community College. They actually had a business support center, and within there they had a program called Procurement Technical Assistance Center. So that program was actually funded by the Department of Defense Logistics Agency, so the DoD. And the basis of that program was really to create both technical assistance and also opportunities for small businesses, whether you be minority owned, women owned, serve disabled veteran owned, or generally a small business that you're looking to do business with the federal government. And I think even other state level and other municipalities as well. So for me, having been working at the state of New York, centrally focused on MWBEs and for state agencies and public authorities, I think I was doing an exceptional job there, and I was pleased with it. But I felt the need to do even more, right? To expand beyond sort of that space and not be pigeonholed. And I thought that the Procurement Technical Assistance Center at LaGuardia really gave me that avenue and that opportunity. And part of that as well was that I was actually poached and brought in by the former director there, Edgar Hernandez, who has become a friend, a mentor, and a huge supporter of me as well, to assist him in that endeavor. So we were able to, for the first time, be able to expand the number of businesses that we were supporting, not only in, because we were centrally geographically focused in the Long Island City, Queens sort of section and parts of Long Island region. But beyond that, we were able to, expand to other, boroughs, but in other sort of the tri-state between northern New Jersey and partnering with other PTACs in that space, and then other PTACs that were in I guess you can say Hudson, mid Hudson region of New York State, and then other states as well that we were beginning to explore. Now, what I enjoyed the most about my experience at the LaGuardia Community College PTAC was the fact that we actually were able to partner with another major construction firm, and to create I think it was either a 6 or 8 week training program, and essentially almost similar to a mentor protege, but different because it wasn't just a period of 1-to-1. There was a cohort of businesses that were anywhere between 8 to about 12 that would go through the different they would be exposed to these different departments that Turner Construction was the name. We call it the Turner Construction Management School. I think it was called, I forget. But point being is it allowed for these growing general contractors and certain folks in certain trades that were looking to do business with other major construction companies like Turner Construction or Skanska to be put on, in a good sort of pathway where they can be viewed as a real partner, subcontractor for some of these major projects, as opposed to it just being, the state or the city or telling or the federal government saying to work with these businesses, but they don't have quite the skills or know how our infrastructure operates. So what that program did was to unravel or reveal what's required when it comes to bonding and what's required when it comes to insurance, what's required when it comes to putting together sort of a bid for a major project that they're looking to have some trade or subcontractors participating in. And ultimately, Jeffrey, I know you can probably attest to this, relationship building, right? That's what it all comes down to. So it gave them that opportunity to see these different individuals in their insurance, in their risk management, in their business development, to have a key point of person to be able to support them, and that resulted in jobs for some of the critical infrastructure projects. Think at in the airports, and then I think there was at one point New York City looking to have these different borough-based jails. So I don't know where that is, but those were some of the things that were in the pipeline that were getting these businesses prepared to get involved in. So yeah.
So it's kind of a through line through your career that you've helped provide people with tools and resources to make the best of their opportunities and to maximize their opportunities and the chance to take care of themselves.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head there about taking care of themselves, right? Because if they're in a position where they can take care of themselves, then that means that they'll be looking out first and foremost to those within their immediate community in terms of hiring and creating jobs. And then from there, whatever else in terms of them expanding will always venture back into what that entrepreneur or business owner has been aspiring to do. So just position for folks to, achieve their dreams.
That's awesome. And it's very selfless of you to help with that, and I can see that you're very passionate about that. I really appreciate it. And I know that you had another position before NYPACE, and you also went through this what sounds like a very rigorous leadership development program called the Coro Leadership New York. Would love to hear about that as well as your position before NYPACE.
Yeah, so the Coro Leadership New York program was I did that while I was actually with another organization known as Local Initiative Support Corporation, a major nonprofit organization within the community and economic development space. So the Coro Leadership New York program, it's very sort of specific, right? So what they do is they look to identify leaders, whether it be in the public sector, whether it be in the private sector, and convene them together for almost a year-long leadership development. And you're looking at the implications or the power dynamics when you're talking about government, when you're talking about community, and then when you're also talking about the different, sort of policies that are important for that aspect there. What I enjoyed most about that experience, of course, it is a rigorous. You have to submit an extensive sort of application and get folks who recommend you to it. Typically, folks that have actually gone through it. But what I enjoyed most about that experience in leadership development program was the fact that it exposed me to expanding my network beyond those that are just within the nonprofit world, right? What do I mean by that? Some examples, some folks I was able to connect to that are at, the NBA, and they're supporting, some of their work for logistic, sort of a team there, and folks that are working at EY, Ernst and Young, sort of the consultant side and whatnot, and then allowing me to be connected to some folks that are working at some of these major government agencies, namely the New York City Economic Development Corporation, the New York City Small Business Services, and some of the other, state, government or public authorities like the MTA and so on and so forth. So it really allowed all of us to come together because we all have a commonality here. We all are leaders. We all are committed to our day-to-day job. We also are vested in terms of doing good while doing good. And that community, I have seen that it has really translated to, when you say the power of people and the power of community and power of the network, because now that we're part of this Coro network, we found that some of the elected officials on the city council were Coro Leadership New York participants. The public advocate for New York City, Jaman, he is a Coro fellow. Some of the former speaker of the New York City Council, Melissa Margarito, I believe, was also a Coro member. And if you expand beyond it, some of the other business leaders have also been part of the Coro Leadership New York. So it's been tremendously impactful for me and expanding my professional and personal network.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a transformative experience that was really rewarding to be involved in that community and then to see them go on to bigger things and sort of create this network for you. How would you say that impacted the rest of your career thus far?
Yeah. I mean, because I completed that probably maybe almost 2 years ago now. And while I was with the Local Initiative Support Corporation, it allowed for me to to approach my job at that time with sort of a refined lens, right? And it allowed me, to hone my leadership approach and skills even better, how to work with different people, how to approach different, government, elected leaders, and how to also be able to advocate for different, sort of issues. Within the Coro, we had what was called City Issues Days, and there will be different topics on education, economic development, affordable housing, a few things, and then the group dynamics would go through and figuring out, okay, what are the barriers? What are the policy implications? Who are the key stakeholders that we should be speaking to? And then how do you address a real issue, but in this sort of hypothetical sort of scenario? And it gave me and others the tools, the analytical skills, and the capability to really be able to carry forth in some of the things that we've been able to do. Now, how do I give an example of that? With when I was with LISC, New York City, Local Initiative Support Corporation, New York City, LISC NY, when I was brought on, I was specifically brought on to help them with developing a program that will support small businesses that were majorly disrupted or shuttered because of COVID. And they needed resources, right, in the form of actual dollars that would be able to, essentially be a lifesaver. So while I was developing that program, I got into the Coro program and was able to begin to implement some of those strategies and tools that I was utilizing, namely the importance of involving community. So what we did was we went out, identify community-based organizations that were already dealing or knew of the small businesses that were majorly and disproportionately impacted by COVID, to allow us to really tailor the funds that we were able to raise and to actually get into the hands of those that truly needed it, because they may have been a little too small to tap into the PPP program, or they didn't have the correct paperwork in place to be able to justify that they had incurred an economic impact due to COVID, or they didn't have sort of some of the basic sort of nuances of business operational management and finance and whatnot. So that allowed us to be able to truly develop an effective program that got funding into the hands of entrepreneurs that truly needed it. And that was just an example of Coro program.
I mean, that's incredible. I mean, it was such a tough time for so many businesses. So to be able to provide true help in such a time, I mean, it's really a lifeline to people. And if you're enjoying this episode, I would greatly appreciate if you could review, like, comment, or subscribe on your favorite platforms. Your engaged support goes a long way in helping the show grow and getting our impactful guests heard. Now back to the show. I read that was over 400 plus BIPOC, women, veteran, and LGBT plus owned small businesses, that had been directly impacted by COVID. And so it's just commendable that you're able to help not only just people in need, but specifically those communities that tend to be underserved.
No, no, absolutely, absolutely. And out of the 400 that were overall impacted through that fund, specifically about 112 of them received $10,000 in grants. We were able to raise a little bit over than 1.1 million in the first cycle, and that that 107, 112 that received funding, about 70 to 73% were industries that were majorly impacted by COVID. So that was, namely retail, personal care, those that were doing certain professional services, and it was, and also restaurants and food and accommodation. So for me and the rest of our team, it was again fulfilling to know that the resources went into the right hands, and it also supported the right demographic of population of people that were disproportionately impacted.
Well, it sounds like an incredible experience to lead you into your current role as Executive Director at New York Professional Advisors for Community Entrepreneurs, also known as NYPACE. What took you there, and kind of in your words, what is NYPACE?
Yes. So NYPACE, the acronym, stands for New York Professional Advisors for Community Entrepreneurs. So a mouthful, but the mission of
You have a lot of acronyms to remember in your world. Yeah.
You'll find, Jeffrey, and more so in government and in the public sector, there's a lot of different acronyms. So we get to, it's alphabet soup, but we get to, and I've been able to remember them all. But NYPACE, the mission of it really is to be a connector, right? A connector between underserved community entrepreneurs and then identifying volunteers that are interested in utilizing these skills to support this underutilized, often overlooked population of entrepreneurs, right? We know that the small businesses are the economic engine and the lifeblood of our economy, whether you're looking at locally, regionally, or nationally. Small businesses play a major role within that. So what NYPACE has discovered through our own very sort of nuanced way was, there are programs, stellar programs out there that are have a curriculum based and have certain models that work and actually do provide or offer, sort of a impact and opportunity for sustainability and growth. But the way NYPACE does it is a lot different, right? For us, it's not cookie cutter, right? We've really hyperly focused on each entrepreneur, and then we identify one major up to two, sort of growth barriers. And then from there, we identify the appropriate sort of composition of volunteer professionals that are coming from some of the top tier professional companies and industries such as banking and industries such on financial services, private equity firms, and they take their skills, their knowledge, their smarts, and they volunteer their time and those skills to supporting this entrepreneur in an 8-week sort of experience. We typically have 3 cohorts per year under our flagship, and the size of it is usually anywhere between 10 up to 15. Those cohorts are either in the spring. We just actually launched one last month for about a month and change in. Then we have our summer cohort, and then we have our fall cohort. Through each of the cohort experience, this is mainly virtual. So that's the other nuanced and incredible thing that we've been able to do over the existence of NYPACE for the last 20 years on paper, but realistically, last 10 years is where we've seen an explosion of growth and impact. So once they're accepted through our program, they go through the 8-week. They're developing a sort of a growth, not necessarily a plan, but sort of a strategy that speaks to either their financial modeling, speaks to how to put together a cost structure, speaks to reviewing their strategic growth plans, and then they're able to begin to sort of implement that within 6 months to a year. That you were able to really, we've been able to do some research to see that there's been impact in terms of accessing capital, whereby last year, the first, after the full year, business that went through our program secured collectively more than $3.3 million in new capital. There's been impact in terms of their new jobs being created. Again, last year, just alone within the first year, nearly 200 jobs being created. And then, of course, the other impact is around when it comes to revenue growth. Nearly 60 to 70% of the businesses that go through our program have seen a positive increase within their revenue. So those are the areas for us, and sort of what NYPACE is doing, and some of the impacts that we're having.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you guys are quite the economic driver. It's really cool to see. And I'm curious, how did you end up going there from LISC?
Oh yeah. I think that was the initial question. Then I got sort of carried away just talking about the organization, how excited I am.
No, I
So
loved it.
yeah, thank you for that. When I was at LISC, I was very satisfied with the role. I wasn't necessarily looking to transition outside of the organization, and there was, I guess, a hiring firm that NYPACE's board had brought on to do some executive leadership searching. So there was an email that I initially received that came across my inbox, middle of working. I'm like, NYPACE, what does that mean? And then I see New York Professional Development Community Entrepreneur. I'm like, never heard of this organization. Let me read their mission. Oh, they do X, Y, Z, community, based and underserved communities, entrepreneurs. I'm like, this is very specific to what I've been doing and what I enjoy. And they said, oh, they're looking for an executive director. I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I'm quite at that level yet, but and plus I'm not really looking to move. Let me just send it over to other folks that might be interested. And I think probably maybe 4, 5, or 6 weeks later, an email comes back again. NYPACE, executive director. I'm like, okay. I began to consider. I'm like, no, it's okay. Maybe they just continue to look around. And then the third time, a former supervisor of me sent over the job description to me and said, hey, take a look at this. So for me, 3 seems to follow me around. So sort of that third time, I'm like, okay, let me really take a look at this and consider this. And then I, from there began to submit my credentials and began to go through the very tough and rigorous process, because they were very tedious in their assessment process, which I think was great. And the other thing is to share with you, Jeff, part of the reason why I was a bit apprehensive and immediately jump on it, besides me not necessarily looking to move from LISC, was the fact that it was an executive director role. I've never held that position before. In all my previous roles, I've been in, managing people, leading and building programs, but never really truly leading an entire organization, which is a beast in itself. So for me, I was like, one side of me is like, yeah, you're not quite ready for that yet. Take a back seat and slow your roll, Jack. I'm like, the other side of it is like, why not? You've been essentially going through these leadership development programs through the National Urban Fellows. You went to DC for nearly a year and saw the different dynamics of that. You just recently went through the Coro Leadership NY program, and that also has enhanced and given you more tools and knowledge and resources. You've gone through a few other things as well. Here is someone who actually is saying that you to consider it. The other side was saying, why not? What's the worst that can happen? And I said, yeah, Ibrahima, why not? This is right within your wheelhouse. It's not like it's another organization with a totally different, mission and space that they're playing in. It's economic development, it's community support, it's entrepreneurship, it's small businesses. This is what you enjoy to do and you have been doing. Why not? And from there, I began to go through the process, and slowly but surely, it's funny, Jeff, sort of the power of the mind, that when you began to take that step, and you, in a way, psych yourself in that you can do this, before you know it, you are doing it. And 8 months later, I mean, it's been a lot of work, a lot of transition between the people dynamic internally, and of course the organization, you know, management and trying to grow it. It's been a lot, but I'm doing it, and that's the most important thing.
From what I've learned about you today, I mean, it seems like it was almost made for you. It was such a great fit. So it's cool to see you in that role, and I love that mindset of going in like knowing you can do it. And I think that's an important lesson for anybody listening to take away is if there's something you're looking at that you feel like it's a step above where you are now, like you can do it. Just work hard, put your effort and your passion into it, and you can do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that's the saying, right? Again, why not you, right?
So where does the funding for this organization come from? Is it similar to the volunteer makeup of people in business? Is it government?
Yeah, NYPACE started out, in early 2000s, and from early 2000 up until about early 2010s, 2011, 2012, it was fully volunteer based. So the co-founders and some of the folks that were board members essentially rolled up their sleeves and were involved in the programming, in the day to day. It wasn't until 2012 when they hired their first official staff member, which that person still remains with our team right now, sort of a brain trust. He's our deputy director, Stephanie Bombachi. It wasn't until then that there was a shift, to become a little bit more professionalized in what we do and how do we go and expand from there. And because of those first 10 years of being volunteer based, there was no funding that NYPACE was able to receive at all. So it was zero. Starting from 2012 up until 2022 is when the organization really began to sort of turn a page and truly, begin to expand and develop and truly begin to put together, I guess you can say, proposals and trying to land corporate sponsors and whatnot. So to your question, what's the breakdown of how we're funded? We're pretty much predominantly funded private. That's through corporations that typically fund our annual sort of gala that we have each fall. And then we have our board of directors are also not only lending their time, their skills, and their professional sort of knowledge and whatnot, but they also do contribute. There is a give-get sort of dynamic that we have with that, whether they contribute, from their own pockets and or they are able to bring in resources. The other dynamic is that there are there've been individual donors, but not to the same level as you may, think for other, major nonprofits organizations. We've been growing. We're a small team of seven. So I would say we do have a major corporate donor who has been supporting this organization for the past 5, 6 years and has essentially been responsible for assisting NYPACE to get to where we have gotten now, right? In 2012, there was only one staff member. By the end of 2022, there's 7 folks that we have on board. In 2012, there were only 7, or by 2012, it was only 7 total small businesses that we had engaged. By the end of 2022, well over 132 businesses that have actually 132 businesses that have gone through our different programs and experiences. In addition to that, the funding side, by 2012, we had only raised $75,000. By the end of 2022, we had been able to raise more than $1.1 million. So there's been a tremendous growth on that end. Now, the last thing I'll say, on that question is that we are looking to diversify. That's been one of my major sort of focus point as the new executive director in my vision and focus on that standpoint.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. It's really interesting to see how the organization has grown. Congratulations on that and on the additional resources you've been able to secure. I'm curious if you're an entrepreneur in the New York community, how do you get involved with NYPACE and what does that experience look like?
Yeah. So, if you're an entrepreneur and you are sort of at that growth ready stage, right? And we say growth ready because we don't work with startup. So if you're just in that ideation stage, or if you just recently, registered and you're working on your first client or customer, NYPACE's program wouldn't be appropriate for you at that standpoint. But if you've been in business for at least 2 years, you're generating revenue, gross revenue, at least $75,000 up until about 5 million is sort of where we have a cap. You're minority owned, you're women owned, you're LGBTQ, you're service disabled veteran owned. You would be more ideal for whom we are focusing on. Our sweet spot is typically businesses that have anywhere between 250 upwards to $400,000 in 250,000 to 400,000 in terms of gross revenue, because by that standpoint, there is a proven concept of your business model, and you probably have a sense of where are your true pain points and your growth barriers. And that's where, when you engage with my program team, we'll be able to have that conversation and truly suss that out. Now, we do a number of different things that can happen. You can either email us directly, going on our website, which is www.nypace.org. And then there is a button there of sort of getting involved. You can sign up on our newsletter. You can also send an immediate sort of a intake form, and then we'll have some folks follow up with you. The second step that you can also take is to email us, info@nypace.org. The third step as well is if you are following us on any of our mediums, social, LinkedIn, Facebook, and or Instagram, we typically post general sort of info sessions. Typically right before our recruitment cycle begins, we probably like anywhere between maybe 4 weeks before, we have general info sessions. That could be a great opportunity for you to join, learn more about the organization, our 8-week program, our sprints program, and a few other things that we're doing, workshops. And then, we'll be able to go through that process. There is a formal application for our 8-week program. And then there's also a similar application for a smaller, shorter program called sprints. So rather than 8 weeks, it's essentially a 3-4 hour intense review of your business model and whatnot. But those are sort of the three ways you can follow us, go on our website, email us, and we'll complete our intake form, and then we'll be able to follow up from there.
That's great. It's such an incredible organization, and I'm curious, what sort of aspirations do you and the organization have for the future, and what's it going to take to get there?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things, great question. One of the things that I'm really focused on, Jeff, is to take NYPACE from being the best kept secret to really being known, right? To being seen as the go-to. So if there is entrepreneurs small business owners that folks are aware of, they're saying, hey, I've been trying to grow my business over the past couple of years. It seems like things are going well, but I need help. Someone could say, have you heard of NYPACE? If you haven't, let me put you in connection with that. If there is a professional out there that is working for any of these major corporations and they feel like, hey, I want to move from being behind the desk to actually doing some real community service and doing, engage in some sort of a social impact driven activity or experience, someone can say, hey, have you heard of NYPACE? They don't have just opportunity for volunteerism, but skills-based volunteer. So you can be able to lend your skills that you can see a tangible result in that. If you are a corporate foundation, or you are part of a philanthropic organization and you're looking to, support a mission-driven organization that is community-based, that is hyper-focused on creating economic opportunity for a population that is underserved and often overlooked, that they can say that, hey, it would be worthwhile for us to put our resources and to infuse this organization with support that can allow them to be able to do what they're doing so well and expand and carry forth their mission. So that's sort of what I would say is the vision and intention in all those three areas. Those are our audience that we're looking to really create opportunity with and partner with.
Awesome. Well, hopefully we can help you get out to at least a few people. We'll make sure to include all the links that you mentioned and the email address and everything in the notes. Um, I'm curious, what are the organization's sort of top thoughts on sustainable economic development that you try to impart on the people that come through?
Yeah, another great question. When you talk about sustainability, right, it's about how do you develop, a solution that's not going to be transactional, or it's not going to be just limiting for just a moment sort of experience, right? That it's in a way transformational, right? That it can go from one sort of experience to the next. And when you talk about economic sort of development and whatnot, it's about creating opportunities that different population, different communities can all be able to access or tap into to meet their different needs. So with the sustainable economic development and whatnot, the way we view it, from my own personal view and professional view, is those different involvement of government, public sector, community, nonprofit organizations, and then also the corporate side. If there is this, I guess you can say, agreement or understanding that each plays a vital role and each is in a way interdependent on one another, then that when you roll out a new effort, a new initiative that can be sustainable, that can have the economic impact. It allows for things to be a lot more sustainable and allow for things to carry forth beyond just a moment experience to more so of a transformative experience.
Thanks for sharing that. And one aspect that I'm curious to get your perspective on is, you're an immigrant in the U.S. How do you feel that has shaped your perspective, generally as a leader, and then specifically in your position?
Yeah, no, great question as well. I mean, I think I've been quite lucky to have been able to immigrate to this great country. Now, of course, I understand the history of this country. It's not perfect, but part of what is my drive, is what my motivation is, to be part of the solution, to create a difference. For me, that immigrant experience, right? This because we moved here by our own volition, by our own decision, seeking better opportunity, seeking better access for different multitude of areas. And in addition to that, having immigrated here and been in the inner cities of New York City, and particularly the Bronx and the South Bronx, one of the poorest congressional districts in the country, it allowed for me to also get an understanding of the economic retardation and the implications of some of the systemic sort of racist policies and things that were implemented that has had I guess you can say, generational impact and effect. Now, despite that, though, I think I am an example of what can happen when you accept that there are issues, there are problems society-wise in America, in these inner cities, in these communities, but also understand that there are opportunities that are possible when you just focus on the solution, that things can happen. I think I have this sort of varying sort of perspective where I can see the opportunity and also see the appreciate the issues. But I know that in moving forward and seeing where I am today, it's because I've been able to change my mindset and I've been able to pursue and go through those different avenues to be able to reach sort of this new form level of what is the American dream, is how I sort of coined it.
Yeah, it's a great way of putting it. And you mentioned these types of experiences back when you were at Empire State, that people would mention, how effective your work had been for them and their lives. And I'm curious, since you've been at NYPACE, has there been, any entrepreneur or anyone touched by your work that's come up to you and really made it clear how much you've impacted them or their business?
Yeah,
Does
yeah.
it really hit home?
No, absolutely. I mean, there are a number of different examples. I think the most immediate one that comes to mind is with Don Kelly, who is the founder and owner of the Nourish Spot. So funny enough, prior to me actually joining NYPACE, I was actually involved in helping her to receive funding from LISC during COVID. So it was just funny that once I arrived here, she was going through an NYPACE 8-week program. I think last summer, we had for the first time an all-women cohort, which is just by coincidence. The the consultant team or the advising team that was assembled for her went through her financials to determine, what is going on. How can you be able to save more funding, and that can be allocated to other areas where you can make investment. So by the end of the 8 week, they were able to not only identify a little bit over $1,000 that could be steered or saved towards other investment opportunities. They were also able to help her to apply for a vendor sort of concession space within last year's U.S. Open. So she was able to, for the first time, utilize those resources, hire a new staff because she was able to save another extra $1,000 per month, got into the U.S. Open, received that exposure because folks that were attending there loved the food, the fresh food and fresh beverages that were being served. And then, actually, funny enough, last week she attended, Dawn, we've been doing some of these social events. We call it the NYPACE Alumni Networking Event, whereby we bring and invite some of the former entrepreneurs that went through one of our cohorts, and also invite the consultant teams to all be able to converge and come together and see, where are we, what's going on. And Dawn pulled me aside and said, Ibrahima, I have another news for you. While we were at the U.S. Open, one of the managers there pulled me aside towards the end, and she said she's a bit sort of, apprehensive, like, okay, what's going on? Did we not perform well? And they said, well, we'd like to invite you to return back next year, even though they haven't even, shared that with other vendors yet. But she was one of the folks that was informed of that. They said that the folks that were there, some of the people that are working for the U.S. Open, were raving about Nourish Boss's juice and also the sandwiches that they had. And then in addition to that, sort of the caveat on top of that, Jeff. So she pulled me aside to say, well, in addition to that, I went to Citi Field and met with some of the management leaders there. And they also had expressed to her that they'd like to invite her to and Nourish Spot to also have a space within the Citi Field baseball stadium there. So which just goes to show you the impact that NYPACE has, and also goes to show you when you do good just for the good, you can also be able to see the implications of people that are, everyday people that are just, this is their livelihood. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that story. I mean, it really shows the effects that you can have and why it's helpful to invest in people. And you really got to see such a transformation, it sounds like, in Dawn's journey, going from the tough times of COVID to where she is today.
Absolutely. And it's amazing. She's been able to get, tons of reviews and tons of media and success stories, all because of, us really intentionally looking to identify those businesses that were, feeling the blight and the brunt of COVID, give them the resources, and then in addition to that, support them through the NYPACE program, and then, sustainability and growth.
You mentioned earlier Mr. Hernandez that's been a mentor for you. I'm curious if you want to talk more about that mentorship, or if there's any others that have been significantly impactful mentors for you.
Yeah, I mean, Edgar Hernandez, Brian Ansari, Valerie White, Lourdes Zapata, Antoine Ford, all of these individuals have had a tremendous impact on me. Tigressa Jones, Nicole Stint, each of those individuals that I have listed and named, they've all either been a supervisor or director supervisor or a boss of mine in my capacities at whether it be SOBRO, whether it be Empire State Development, whether it be PTAC, whether it be LISC New York City. They've all been supportive of my both personal and professional development. And I'm tremendously grateful for them. What they've recognized is the importance of pouring into the next generation of leaders, and recognizing the importance of, I guess, if you approach, and this is just my own little 2 cents for folks out there that may be looking for mentors, make yourself coachable, make yourself approachable, and humble yourself, right? Even if you may know a little bit more than that individual, the best piece of advice that my mother gave me was to always act stupid or act dumb, right? And then once you act stupid or act dumb and say, "I don't know this. Can you tell me more about it?" You'll be surprised at how much people want to be able to share how much they know or how much they think they know. And even if they're not quite right, you just be like, "Oh, okay, wow, thank you for sharing that." And before you know it, you're building that rapport and they want to support you even more.
Well, I'm sure all the great names that you mentioned were right most of the time, and uh, it's incredible that you've been able to, not only come across such great people in your working environments, but people that really added value to your life and your career long term.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm endeavor, to them, and truly, truly, truly appreciative of them, and I'm really, really excited to do some tremendous work here at NYPACE, from my board of directors that essentially have said, "Here, Ibrahima, we know you're a first-time executive director. We know that you're a budding leader, but we want to entrust you to build this organization and take it to the next level." So I'm appreciative of the folks that, my board of directors and their support there. And then, of course, the staff that I've inherited. It seems to be a support that I'm receiving from them as well for us to do some tremendous work.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to see where NY Pace goes. And now is the point of the podcast. If you'd like, you can ask me a question.
Yes, yes, yes. I was waiting for this, right? We can, turn the things around a little bit. So for you, Jeff, I know that you are a philanthropist, and you yourself have been an entrepreneur and done some tremendous work. From what I've read in your career, and you've seen a lot of things also in your life. What led you to starting this podcast, and what would be one or two sort of recommendations or suggestions you would give for me?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you for the kind words. And, um, in terms of the podcast, it's a combination of things, an opportunity to grow my own voice while shining a light on others that are doing incredible work. We live in a society and that has media that seems to focus on the negative, and there's so many positive things going on out there, so many people that are working to create positive outcomes and social impact. And so I think it's really important to highlight that. And I felt it was that opportunity to show the good going on in the world. And, um, in terms of general advice, really it's a lot of it you seem to have an open mind that's willing to grow. You shared specifically not to go into something thinking you know everything. Like that goes such a tremendously long way. And I think overall, just I tend to give the benefit of the doubt to people just in general. In hopes that they will be good. And oftentimes, I'd say more often than not, that is the case. People tend toward good, unless they're stoked otherwise. And so I try to keep that in mind in my various interactions and the work that I do.
And one more, people are the answer. How did you arrive to that? Because I know it's implied, but like, how did you coin that together and can say, this is going to be the title of my podcast?
Yeah. So, I knew I wanted to do a podcast about innovators and social impact. I'd met so many great ones. And, I'll be honest and transparent. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it on an episode before, but I had a pretty incredible psilocybin trip with a friend. And the next day I was trying to come up with what the name would be for the podcast. And I sort of reflected on my learnings over my experience. And part of it was just that people are what make things happen one way or another, and people are such an incredible resource of potential. And yeah, it just kind of came to mind. People are the answer. And I looked up and saw that peoplearetheanswer.com was available. Seemed like a good sign, and took it from there.
Yeah, no. So I think it's an exceptional title and very fitting for this engagement you're having with different dynamic people and hearing their life experience and hearing what drives them and motivates them. So kudos and salute my hat to you and your team.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that. It's a labor of love, if you will, and it's been incredible. Some of the people that I've gotten to talk to, and I just love the idea of, even if one person listening hears what you guys are doing at NYPACE and carries that over into something that they're doing, it'll go a long way to affect people's lives, and that really excites me. And um, so, getting back to asking you questions, if everything were to end tomorrow, you disappear one way or another, what are you most proud of?
Yeah. So last year I got married. And that was a goal, of mine, or rather, let's say, a preparation over these past probably few years, and had to go through some character building and preparation that I think the Almighty, sort of had the plan for it, and I'm appreciative of that. And then last month, I actually, along with my wife, welcomed our first child, a baby boy, into the world.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so that would be sort of the appreciate proudest moments right now. I think I read somewhere or heard somewhere that a Jewish rabbi once said, if you're looking to leave a legacy behind, you should do three things. One, plant a tree, which I had the fortunate to be able to do. Secondly, is to have a child. If it's a son, great. If it's a girl, it's also good as well. And the third thing, which is still in the works, we'll see what happens, is to write a book. So two of three are checked off, and we'll see what the future holds for the third one. So that's what I'm proud of right now, having a supportive wife, and of course having brought in a baby boy into the world.
That's amazing, and congratulations. I have two young boys myself,
Okay.
so I can certainly relate. And
Thanks. Yeah.
yeah, it's magical. There's nothing like it, and all the cliches are true
Mm.
that people tend to say, and you realize it once it happens.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say this first 6 weeks, it's been I guess, an adjustment in terms of my sleep cycle. But
I bet I
yeah.
can definitely imagine that, and good on you for
Yeah.
keeping up with everything. You've got a lot going on, but in a great
Yeah.
way. And the big question I make sure to ask every guest: if you could snap your fingers and fix one thing in the world, what would it be, and how do you think that change would reverberate?
Yeah. That's a tough one, too, because a lot of different things. I think just looking at my own perspective and what I have found to be tremendously, I guess, valuable for me is to remove the victimhood mentality and seeing ourselves, oh, there's racism here. Oh, there's this and such. And if we were to remove that and approach things from a solutions oriented approach, I think this world would have tremendous advancements and tremendous, sort of innovative approaches, and we'll just skyrocket in terms of the things that we're looking to address that are major societal problems. And I think when you remove that victimhood mentality, you have this solutions oriented sort of approach. I think in the title of this podcast, which I adore, you'll find that people truly are the answer. We've been able to make tremendous sort of headway in history because of what people have done when we come together and we remove that we cannot do this and say what is possible if we attempt to do this. So that's what I would say in terms of that question.
No, it's an interesting way of putting it, sort of eliminating the victimhood and focusing on solutions. I think that is tremendous. Thank you so much for that. And I hope others will take that with them, and when their mind maybe is going one way, start to think instead of a solution. And it's been awesome having you on here, learning your story. It's certainly been inspiring, and I love the work that you're doing at NYPACE. I'll be sure to share the various links that you mentioned and the email. Anything else that you want to share with our audience before we finish up?
No. I want to be able to thank you as well, Jeffrey, along with your entire team. Us on the back end, it's working and supporting on this. I appreciate the fact that you all felt that there was enough of a juice here to invite me to be part of your podcast, and I hope that your listeners will find at least one thing that I said here to be helpful for them in this life journey that we're all on.
Well, you are certainly one of the people that are the answer, and there's a lot for people to mine from this conversation. So thank you so much. Hope to keep our conversation going, and I wish you the best of luck with your work.
Thank you so much, everyone, and God bless you, and stay tuned for everything else. All right, thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of People Are the Answer. If you enjoyed the episode, share it with friends, and reviews or subscriptions on your favorite platforms go a long way to help the show grow. I want to share these incredible people and their remarkable work with as many others as possible. Thanks for your support. For more, go to peoplearetheanswer.com.